Okay, good evening. To everybody here and to the worldwide web audience. Can we? So today was a special day in the Hebrew calendar. It's called Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of Shvat, which is known as the New Year of the trees. So the Mishnah in the Talmud says that there are 4 different types of Rosh Hashanah, different New Years. One, of course, the Rosh Hashanah, the famous Rosh Hashanah that we all honor and celebrate in the beginning of the year. Rosh Hashanah, we say Happy New Year right before Yom Kippur. That's the day when Adam and Eve were created in the biblical account of Genesis. And but there are also 3 other Rosh Hashanahs, and one of them is the Rosh Hashanah of trees. Because in Israel, during this day, today, is when the beginning of the spring season, the beginning of the season where the vegetation begins to sprout. So every year, as we know, vegetation goes through its seasons. So this is the new season of growth, and we honor this day, even though we're human beings. And you can wonder, why are we honoring the New Year for trees? You know, the trees should celebrate their Rosh Hashanah. We humans should celebrate our Rosh Hashanah. But clearly, human beings are not just one part of creation, of existence, but we also carry responsibility for the entire environment, the entire world. And we interact and are interdependent on all parts of the world, the mineral world, the vegetable world, the animal world, and of course the human world. So, even on a basic scientific level, the world of vegetation, the world of trees, the world of that whole they call it flora, is without it we would not be able to exist in this earth. You know, besides photosynthesis and all the other ways that the forests cover and trees throughout the world absorb toxins, carbon monoxide, and other forces that would kill life. There are many other ways and many complex ways and eloquent ways that the universe is extremely symbiotic, and therefore we honor not just the new year when the human being was created, but also the new year when the trees begin their new journey, their new season. At the same time, obviously there are deeper elements to this. It's not just that we're honoring that the trees begin to grow, so therefore we're honoring the fact that they support life and are very necessary for the cycle of life to be balanced and so on. But also because if that was the case, then there's also why don't we honor every Rosh Hashanah of every type of part of existence? You know, there's also animals in this world. There are minerals. Even though you can't see minerals go through a cycle, there's no new year for let's say for stones or for salt or so on. But nevertheless, if we're interdependent, clearly the fact that we honor the new year for the trees means there's some type of relationship, special relationship between humans and trees. So the Torah actually states in a verse, Ki Adam Eitz Hasada. It says that a human being is like the tree in the field. It's a verse that states that and compares the human being to a tree. And this is based on a very beautiful principle in Judaism, called microcosm, macrocosm. That everything includes everything in it, like a hologram. That each of us, each human being, and the truth is in every particle of existence, has in a microcosm all the rest of existence. Today we see this in many ways, even on a subatomic level, and the truth is also on a cellular level in human beings. You know, even one cell in your body is unique to you and has some type of relationship with all the other cells. And it's not like we all share the same common cells. There is a certain type of microcosm, macrocosm, even on the most minute and most microscopic level. So in that sense, the Medrash says the following: that we, a human being, each human being is Elam Katan Zeh Adam. Every human being is a small universe, and the Elam Gadol, the large universe, is like a large organism. It's just a question of how amplified, how magnified it is. And the Medrash continues and says that just like there are mountains and valleys, so too in our body there are mountains and valleys. And just like there's mineral, vegetable, animal, so too we also have a mineral component, which are our bones, our teeth, calcium. We have a vegetable component, things that grow, like our hair and our nails. And then we have an animal component, the spirit, the blood, the life force. And of course, in a human being, there's also the fourth dimension, makes us human. Sometimes we're called medaber, the speaker. We're able to communicate. Even though animals also have ability to communicate, but they don't have the complex language, especially abstract language, a language to express abstract ideas. Their language is primarily about their survival and interaction on that level. But the point is that each of us we have daimim tzemeach chai, we have within us mineral, vegetable, and therefore we have elements that are very similar to a tree. So when you study a tree, when I say a tree, I mean all vegetation, but a tree is just perhaps maybe the epitome, Rosh Hashanah Lilonis, or Rosh Hashanah Ilon, which is what the name of it called. It's called the New Year for trees. Really means all vegetation, but trees are essentially the centerpiece of the vegetable world. So when you study a tree and all its components, you actually can find parallels in human life. And the truth is, this is across the board with everything in nature. There's an expression, sorry, echza leka, from my flesh I behold God. The best example for the divine, the best metaphors for spirituality are actually in our own body and in our own natural world. So when you look at the stars, or you look at any component of nature, and you study it, you actually can learn about yourself. So there's the nature within each of us, and the rules of nature, and their poetry, and their symmetry, are all reflective and have lessons that teach us many, many different things. One of my dreams is to create a project. These nature shows on TV where they explore the wild, whether it's mineral, vegetable, or animal world, and each species underwater. Today in the most obscure places, it's hard to imagine how even they get cameras in those caverns. But when you study, it's an unbelievable mystery and beauty to each component, to each species, to each component of the universe. And one of my dreams was to go and take it one step further. What's the lesson in each of those? Each species has its own way of surviving, of interacting, growing, protecting itself, hunting, and so on. And what the lessons are psychological lessons that we can learn from these different, from the multitude of creatures on the universe, and including nature itself, in our own lives. There are lessons in regeneration, there are lessons in survival, there are lessons of adaptation. It goes on and on, that we can learn so many beautiful lessons, and each creature has its own particular strengths. And the list goes on. It really is an endless source of inspiration, if you think about it. So there's an expression in the book of Psalms that says, "Mar rabba masach Hashem, mar gadla masach Hashem," which means how great are God's creations, and how large are God's creations, which are meant to be really a way of expressing that by studying these creations, by studying the creatures and the nature of the universe, we actually can learn about the divine, and we learn about its mysteries, and we can learn about ourselves. And there are many psychological and philosophical parallels between all parts of nature. So that is definitely a series I want to embark upon. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it, but see this as one component in it. Today we'll talk about trees. So the tree, when you study it, you'll find many, many parallels and lessons in our own lives. And really that's the whole purpose of it. Why did God create a universe with such multitudes, with so many diverse systems? So every species has its own rules. What works for one creature does not work for another. There are creatures that are extremely nurturing to their children. There are others that just let their children grow as soon as they are born. There's some creatures that even consume their children. I guess that's a lesson for dysfunctional parenting. But the point is that the diversity is because it's meant to teach us about the diversity of our own lives. So in this context, since it's Rosh Hashanah, since it's the New Year for the trees, so I was I'm going to discuss what lessons we learn from the trees. But before I begin, I wanted to read. Well, I don't know if you've seen the email that was sent out today about the description of the class. So just to quote the Talmud, that there's a Talmud in the tractate Cynics, 5b, if you want to look it up exactly. So the tractate tells this is a beautiful story. The story goes like this: a man was traveling through the desert. It's talking about a blessing that someone gives to another person. But the problem is that the other person that he met, and he wants to bless, who did him a favor, has everything. He's wealthy, he's intelligent, he has everything that one can need in this world. So he's wondering, what kind of blessing can you give somebody that seems to have everything? And the Talmud says, with an analogy. The analogy is of a man that was traveling through the desert, hungry, thirsty, and tired. Hungry, thirsty, and tired. You ever feel that way? When he came upon a tree bearing luscious fruit and affording plenty of shade, underneath which ran a spring of water. So he had everything: fruit, shade, and water. So he's hungry, thirsty, and tired. So he has a place to rest his head. He ate of the fruit, drank of the water, and rested beneath the shade. When he was about to leave, he turned to the tree and said, "Tree, O tree, with what should I bless you? Should I bless you that your fruit be sweet? That your fruit be sweet? Your fruit is already sweet. Should I bless you that your shade be plentiful? Your shade is plentiful. That a spring of water should run beneath you? A spring of water already runs beneath you. There's only one thing with which I can bless you." And this is what he said to the tree: "May it be God's will that all the trees planted from your seed should be like you." That's what he blessed him. So, you see, first of all, just a beautiful passage. Number one, the sensitivity to the environment. How many of us thank a tree because it provides us with something? Today they talk so much about environmental protection and how we're destroying the environment. And if you really want to know who the first environmentalists, you just have to open up a Torah. The Torah has actually one of the prohibitions, one of the laws in the Torah is called Bal Tashchis. Bal Tashchis means you're not allowed to damage, destroy, mutilate, in any way deface any part of the universe, any part, anything. Not just human beings, but even animals and vegetable and mineral. We have no right to go and change and destroy in any way, alter the face of this earth. So you can ask the question, so then what right did we have to build civilizations and clear jungles and protect ourselves from the elements? So I'll address that in a moment. But there is Bal Tashchis. You're not allowed to destroy things for no reason. Why? Because it's not ours to destroy. We didn't create it. It's a gift. As a matter of fact, there's even a law about self-mutilation. The Torah prohibits somebody mutilating themselves, their own bodies. Why? So the commentaries explain, the Radbaz and others explain, is because the body of a human being is nechasur shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's God's property, His divine property. If someone gave you something to watch over as a gift or as a loan, and you deface it or alter it, that's insulting, especially if they gave it to you for free. So life is a gift, and it's not our property. So therefore, we can't even mutilate oneself. Well, you could argue, you know what? It's my own body. Nobody else. I'm not hurting anyone else. No, it's not your body. It's not you didn't create your body. It was given to you as a gift. And the same is true with all of the universe. So we have very strong prohibitions. There was a story of one of the Rebbes. There was a previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Chabad Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. Last week was his Yortzeit, 62nd Yortzeit, on the 10th of Shvat. So he was walking as a child, he was once taking a walk with his father. It was the Rebbe before him, Rab Shalom Ber Rab Shaber Rashab was his name. This was in Russia. The city of Lubavitch is where they lived. This is in Belarus, or what was called White Russia. And as they were walking and talking, the little child, who would later become a great Rebbe, tore off a leaf from a tree and began to rub it until it, he rubbed it all and just scattered whatever he had left in his fingers. And his father said to him, you just took a leaf of a tree, and for no reason, you destroyed its existence. How do you know what this leaf was going to do the rest of its life. Essentially taught him the sensitivity that you don't just take a leaf of a tree, which is something so frivolous that most of us wouldn't even pay attention, let alone some more serious damage to the environment. Because you see, everything from a Torah point of view is sacred in this universe. It's a sacred universe put here by God. So God-mandated sanctity is far greater than just human sensibilities. For example, someone that says, I'm sensitive to the environment, to other creatures, that's very sweet, but it's usually going to be on your terms. And I remember years ago at a class, so right at the beginning of the class, someone new came to the class with a friend of his who I knew, but this was a new person, and I don't know what was with him, but even before I opened my mouth, he was very aggressive, and he blurted out this type of question to me right before the class began. He said, "What right do Jews, or what was the word he used, have to kill animals and consume them meat for Shabbos, for holidays, and so on?" That was his question to me, but his question was with a lot of anger. I saw there was more going on here than meets the eye. Anyway, I don't know why I said what I said, but I did, and was maybe today I'd be a little more sensitive, but so I decided I'll address the question, and became part of the beginning of the class. And I said to the fellow, and to everybody, I said, I asked the guy who asked me the question, I said, what do you think about somebody who's abusive to his family, a vegetarian that's abusive to his family? That's what I said. And man, did this guy get angry. He started yelling and screaming. And later I found out that he's both. So this was a small mini prophecy that God must have planted in my mind. And my point was, of course, and he was like hysterical. So my point was, of course, that when you choose where you want to be sensitive, so you can be a vegetarian, very sensitive to the animal kingdom, but when it comes to your own family, you can be very abusive. How do you explain that one? Now, of course, two wrongs don't make a right, but the bottom line is, you're sensitive, you're not sensitive. So from a Torah point of view, it's across the board. You're a sensitive human being to everything of life. Every life is sacred, and it's not selective. And what happened at the end there was, his friend calmed him down, etc., etc., and told him that I didn't have a clue what about his life. But I guess what they say, if the Ganav brennt der Hittel, das Hittel, the expression, that when you say something, you say something critical, and even if you don't point an accusing finger at someone, there's an expression in Yiddish that the Ganav, the person who's the thief, is gonna feel and say, "Hey, why are you talking about me?" Because the exact Yiddish expression is that the Ganav's hat is burning. Meaning that he feels that you're accusing him, even though you never mentioned his name. So, just briefly, even though this is not what I wanted to discuss, but I'll just briefly state the following. So the only right that the Torah gives us, therefore, to touch anything in this universe, whether it's mineral, vegetable, or animal, is because we're charged with the ability to elevate it to a higher state. And if you don't do that, you really have no right to touch anything. So, I've had my discussions with different vegetarians who told me, we have no right to kill anything in the animal world. So I asked them, and what right do you have to eat vegetables and minerals? Why? Because there's no blood? Because they don't cry when they die? Maybe they have their own life, but what right do we have to consume another element? Well, they say, if we don't eat vegetable and mineral, we'll die. So in other words, you decide. So who says your death is less important than the death of the vegetable and mineral? So the Torah's response to all of this is that there's one God that created all of it. It's all sacred. But He charged the human being with the power and the ability to elevate the universe to even a greater place. And I've used this example, I think, last week or a few weeks ago. You walking down in a field, you see a luscious apple. Just an example, it could be any piece of food. Now I know we don't really walk in fields these days, and we don't really know what apple trees look like except what we see in pictures, most of us. But just use your imagination, and you see this piece of food, and you want it, you're hungry or thirsty, and it's a hot day, etc. Like this story in the Talmud. So what right do you have to take this apple off the tree? The answer is you're never right unless you do something, which is the intention of eating that apple with the intention of using its energy to do something positive with your life. And if you eat that apple and you use the energy either for no particular reason at all, or even worse, for something destructive, then the apple and in its soul can come and demand and prosecute you with a demand. What right did you have to take me off of my tree where I was not hurting anyone and use me for either no reason at all or to hurt another human being? And there's a Hasidic aphorism expression that says like this, that when a wicked person walks down the street, the cobblestones cry out, "What right do you have to walk on me? I never transgressed." So it's really, obviously this is metaphorical. The point is that there's a relationship and responsibility to the world in which we live, and obviously to each other. So a person who's hypersensitive and hyper soulful will be constantly sensitive to this fact. And that's why when before we eat a piece of food, we make a blessing, even a drink of water. The blessing is obviously on a basic level saying thank you for giving me this water to God, but you're also acknowledging to the water, as the Torah says, not on bread alone does man live. Not on bread alone does a human being live, but on the spark of the divine, the Dvar Hashem, Hashem, on the God's voice, or the spark of the divine spark that's within the food. So in making a blessing, you're actually acknowledging and telling the water, I will take care of you, that I will do what I have to do, that the refreshment or the energy that I gain from you will be used for something far greater that you could never achieve. And then the apple and the water and whatever other part of the universe that we use for our growth, then thank us, because the apple could never have helped another human being. The apple could never have done anything of that magnitude. So that is our responsibility. And if we don't use it that way, then we actually have desecrated not just God, but also God's creation and God's creatures, the sanctity of this earth. Now, of course, we'd love to meet people who are that sensitive, but this is the standard. And you can quote me on this next time you see somebody do something that is destructive. But it's not me. I'm just really repeating what it says in the Torah. But going back to the discussion here about trees. So I was reading this Talmud, which, as I said, the first simple lesson is a beautiful lesson of how a person who was benefited from the shade, from the fruits, and from the spring of water under the tree, acknowledged it, not just saying thank you, he actually gave a blessing to the tree. Now, obviously, this is a very beautiful thing, because some people may wonder, the tree doesn't really have any intelligence. Why would you give a blessing to a tree? But first of all, how do we know what intelligence it has or doesn't have? Clearly a tree is pretty smart when it comes to figuring out where to find water. And if you look at a tree's infrastructure or structure, it's an awesome display of efficiency and so on. So it may not be its own intelligence as a brain or a mind like we may have, but there's an intelligence in nature. And at minimum, it's God's intelligence that infused in every part of nature a certain intelligence how to function. And if the vegetable world, the world of vegetation, trees and so on, flowers, did not function the way they function, we would not have life on this earth. So just the fact that this man acknowledged that is beautiful. And beyond that, he also blessed the tree. And what did he say to the tree that had everything? He said, may your seeds bear other trees like yourself. Which means that that's a blessing you can give. I don't know, human beings, we can't say nobody is perfect, nobody has everything. But sometimes you may meet a person that has many features, many qualities, and may not be obvious what you can bless them with. So you can always take from this and say, to bless them, using the words of the Talmud, may it be will that the trees planted from your seed should be like you. Which, of course, is a beautiful blessing in general, but it also captures another important theme here, and that is the theme of eternity. One of the factors that the vegetable world teaches us is the perpetuation that vegetation has. So the Torah describes, it says that on day 1, God created light. Let there be light. On day 2, it says God separated from the higher waters from the lower waters, heaven and earth. And on day 3, it says God created semeach, vegetation, growth, trees, shrubs, grass, and so on. But He implanted something that did not exist before: the ability that one vegetation should give birth to the next, ad infinitum. Which is why day 3 has a very special quality. It says in the Torah, each day, it says, but after the day ended, it says God saw what He created and saw that it was good. So the Torah says. Each day you say that. So end of day 1, it says, and Vayer Vahibeker Yom Echad, it was evening, it was morning, Vayer Vahibeker, it was evening, it was morning, day 1, first day, and Vayem Elokim, and God said it was good. That what He created was good. Day 2 is the only day that's missing that statement. It does not say good. Day 3, it says good. Day 4, day 5, day 6. But in day 3, it says twice. The verse tells us that God says twice it was good. So the Medrash explains why is day 2 missing the good and day 3 has like a double good. It explains the following: because day 2 and day 1, the creation of light, is an obviously blessing. So God's acknowledging it was good, which of course begs the question: did God not know it was good? Why does He have to say it was good? Because God was, first of all, even God wants to confirm after you do it that something is good, which is a lesson to all of us, that even though you may think all your ideas may be great, but when you actually implement and execute something, you want to look at it and be able to acknowledge and confirm this was proper. But also God was describing the value on our terms, that light in this universe is a blessing. And saying it was good is like basically saying it's an obvious blessing. But in day 2, the Medrash tells us, the sages tell us, because God separated between upper and lower, on day 2 was the birth of diversity, of separation, which, as the Medrash says, was the birth also of potential chaos. Potential machlekes was born. I'll explain that in a moment. And day 3 is the birth of peace, the reconciliation between two forces. What this means is as follows. Just to use it more, speak about it more in philosophical terms. When you have only one entity, and there's no diversity, there's also no room for chaos, there's no room for battle, for divisiveness. Because there is nothing, there's only one. When you're alone in a room, there's no one to fight with. Actually, I should correct that. Today we fight with ourselves. But that's because you have many personalities within you. But generally speaking, when there's only one, there's no room for any type of battle. If there was only one human being on earth, there's no one to fight with, there's no war. So day 1, the creation of light, there was unity abounded, which is beautiful, but there's also no potential, there's no diversity. Day 2, diversity was born, which means two entities. As soon as there's two entities that are different, they may have different opinions. Like they say about Jews, two Jews, 2 opinions, 3 Jews, 3 opinions, and so on. And it exponentially grows. At some point, 20 Jews is like 25 opinions. How that works, I don't really know, but that's how it happens, right? So when 20 people are arguing, it sounds a lot louder than just sum of 20 parts. So when there's diversity, you now have different elements. That per se is not a bad thing, because diversity allows for also what we call beauty. So day 3 is the birth of beauty, of harmony within diversity. In Hebrew, the word is shalom. Shalom means peace. But peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is also a state of being on its own. Just like love is not the absence of hate. Peace is a state of being. It also means shalom in Hebrew means complete, wholesome. So what is shalom from a Torah point of view? It's really equivalent to beauty. Beauty is a form of emes, which is a harmony within diversity. So if you have one musical note, or one beautiful color, as beautiful as it may be, the color blue, but it's limited beauty. You can't really call it beautiful. You can say it's a nice color. Then you have a color red, you have a color green, you have yellow, you have orange, etc., etc. When you bring together several colors and you combine them in a symmetrical way, that you can call beautiful. One musical note can be a nice sound, but if you play it too long, it'll become noise. It'll become monotonous. Many musical notes of different sounds, different pitches, different rhythms, and you combine them properly, that creates the symphony, the beauty called music. But there's always potential. As soon as you have diversity, you have potential. What happens if you don't play the notes in the right order? What happens if you don't put the colors in the right balance? Then you have you'll have something that's called chaos. So day 2, what did the sages say? We cannot say God did not say it was good, because on day 2 the jury is still out. Now diversity is created, but we don't yet know what will happen with this diversity. It can also be the potential for divisiveness, or it could be the potential of beauty. On day 3, that issue is resolved, because on day 3, the concept of beauty, or tiferes. So in the Kabbalistic structure of spheres, you may know chesed, gvura, tiferes. So chesed is the unity of love, which is like light, day 1. Gvura is division, separates things. Gvura is measuring, its discretion, its distinction, and diversity. And then comes Tiferes, which is the 3rd day, and that creates harmony. And throughout Jewish thought, you'll find this element of 1, 2, 3. For example, the month of Nisan, the Passover, is compared to the day 1, which is a revelation from above. The days of the Omer are days of diversity, and actually led to machlekes, to divisiveness. And Shavuos, the 3rd month, is Tiferes. It says Tiferes Zamat Torah creates harmony between heaven and earth, between matter and spirit. And throughout, as I said, through Jewish thought, you'll find this principle in many, many different ways manifest. As I said, in the sporadic structure of the Kabbalistic structure, so Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes are like a triangle, are 3 pillars, and if you look at it, think of it of the human being, there's the right side, there's the left side, there's the center. There's the right brain, left brain, center brain. There's right side, left side, spine. What would a body be like, God forbid, without a spine? It wouldn't be able to hold up. You always need a 3rd dimension to create balance. So even on a basic level in architecture, a table, for it to stand, must have at least 3 legs. 4 legs will make it more steady. But 2, it's impossible for something to stand on 2 legs. So bottom line is, the third column is the center column that creates harmony, or like reconciles between diversity. In legal language, it's a concept of a mediator. It's like we say in the morning prayer, that there's 2 verses that contradict each other. Kosuv machkishin zeh shnei ksuvim, uba kosuv ashlishi machriya beineim. And the 3rd verse comes and reconciles, which means it finds a commonality. It doesn't eliminate both verses, because that wouldn't be peace. When someone truly creates harmony between 2 individuals who are disagreeing, it's not that person is saying, oh, you know what, we defer, that we will only, you're right and the other person is wrong. Then that's not harmony. Then you're basically annihilating the other opinion. You know, sometimes that happens in a legal case. But if you want to create shalom, harmony means finding the strength of both of them, and finding a 3rd element where they can join together and say, you know, here's a wise 3rd option, that win-win, everybody gains. So what does this have to do with the discussion of Tu B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Leilon? Because on day 3, besides the birth of harmony, is also the birth of vegetation. And it's not disconnected. This is the day where you have the double good, a good for day 2 and a good for day 3. It is reflected in the power of the birth of vegetation. So as the Torah says, what was the power of vegetation? You know, that God could create, God is a creator. Something that is beyond something that does not have any definition, or cannot be defined by any existential terms that we define things. Something that is, let's call it, is his own source, can create other things. No one but God can create. Because God is in a different type of entity. Everything in existence has a source. You know, we as human beings, we have our parents. Our parents have their parents. And at some point, there's the first parent. Everything has a beginning. Except an entity that has no beginning and no end, which is not really the scope of our discussion. What is the definition of what Hasidic language calls atzmos, an undefined state of existence. But suffice it to say, it's nothing like we can relate to. And that has the power to put something in motion, to start something, to create. So the question is, does that Creator, has He given us anything in our lives that we can create as well? Because creating is obviously the ultimate achievement. Because to reshape things, as they say, yesh mi yesh, to take one object and reshape it to another can be very powerful, and many great things are done, but it doesn't have quite the same type of innovation as taking what we call ex nihilo, from nothing, something from nothing. So when is that power of creation given over to the creature? On day 3. Day 3 is the first time God plants, no pun intended, He implants inside of plants, inside of trees, inside of vegetation, inside of grass, the ability to perpetuate itself. Now we take it for granted, it's just a given, but think about it for a moment. Not everything has the power to perpetuate itself. For example, the mineral world doesn't have it. A stone is a stone, but it can't create another stone. It cannot give birth to another stone. So every stone has to be put there by someone. Vegetation is the first, at least in the order of creation, where something has the power to pre-ese pre. A fruit creates another fruit. It has seeds. So every tree will lay its seeds, and those seeds will replicate, and basically forever, unless something stops it. So day 3, when is the power? When can you create something? When you create harmony within diversity. As long as you have only one force, you cannot create. We see it even in the context of human propagation. You see, you need to mate. There's no one human being, there's no one individual that can create. You need to have a man and a woman, male and female. Same thing in the animal world. In the vegetable world, it's interesting, science does not really describe it as male and female, but for a seed to emerge, there are 2 forces at work, even in the vegetable world. They're not masculine and feminine quite in the same way, but even flowers and others, when you look at how the pollinating process works, you'll see it's forces at work, because there's no such thing as giving birth to something without 2 forces coming together. Because what would force it to give birth? Why not just stay where you are? So yes, there is the example of the one-celled amoeba, which says that it's a cell that just propagates itself. But there too, scientists have found that there is also 2 elements. There's a positive and negative force. Bottom line, energy cannot be generated unless there's a positive and negative, unless there are 2 forces to create energy. For something to perpetuate, it needs power. Or else it'll just ride on its own energy until it dies out. 2 forces come together, they create a new energy, call it synergy, that gives birth to that gives birth to another entity. So on day 3, because there's the harmony within diversity, the teferis, it has the power. That's why it has the power to give birth, and vice versa. There's nothing more beautiful when you see 2 forces come together and give birth to a third dimension. Again, we take these things for granted, but look at life. The idea that there's no two human beings that are similar. The Talmud says, "Ein deis ein shavis." No 2 people have the same mind. There are no 2 people who have the same face. Ein partzafei ein shavis. We all are individuals, and though we carry the genes and the chromosomes and DNA of our parents, but the combination of our parents is the first time there's ever been such a combination. Now, even when you're talking about brothers and sisters, siblings, or even the identical twins are not exactly identical. There are differences. They're very, very similar, and it's obviously a unique phenomenon. But they're not clones. They're not complete clones. So the fact is that the idea of something being perpetuated and continuously creating new dimensions of life is a result of harmony within diversity. So light, on day 1, as powerful as light is, it cannot give birth to other light. Of course, one flame, you can ignite another flame, but it doesn't give birth to it. It's just the ability to spread. And the place where real perpetuation takes place is on day 3. So the first lesson we learn from a tree is the power to perpetuate. And as I said, the blessing that he gave, that this fellow gave to the tree, says, may be God's will that the trees planted from your seeds should be like you. But you may wonder, why would he have to have God's will here? The fact of the matter is, once a tree spreads its seeds, what else is going to be born if not something like the tree? Is the seeds from this tree, after all? When parents give birth to a child, that child is going to have a personality similar to its parents. It will be unique. It will be different in some ways, a different combination, because the child has a combination of the hereditary factors of both father and mother. But it's definitely not going to be like someone else. So what is his blessing exactly that he gives the blessing to the tree that it should be other like you? So obviously, first of all, the fact is, you have in the Talmud, you have the stories whether a tzaddik, a person who's a righteous person, doesn't mean that he will give birth to righteous people. Not necessarily. Even though we carry the genes of our parents, it doesn't mean that we're going to make the same choices that they made. So you can have a righteous person give birth to a person who's not so righteous, and you can have vice versa. You could have someone who's not very righteous. You say, mi yotze toil mitame, something pure came out of something impure, is said about Abraham came from Terach. So Terach was an idol worshiper. Not only was he an idol worshiper, he was an idol manufacturer. So if someone had given Terach a blessing, may your seed look like you, Abraham, we wouldn't be here today. Let's put it that way. Abraham, though he had the genes of Terach, he made a different choice. And he must have had his father's strengths. He definitely had his father's personality. But his choice was different. So the blessing that you tell someone that when you say somebody who's beautiful, like in this case, the tree had beautiful, luscious fruit, had a great shade, offered shade, and had this brook of water, spring of water underneath it. So the blessing is that may other trees serve the same way as you do. So the fact that, of course, an apple tree is not going to give birth to a rose bush, at least as far as I know, without grafting and without any type of hybrid, tampering. But you could have a tree give birth to another tree, and the other tree should wither, should not be able to withstand a storm, etc. So the blessing is, and there you need God's help, that even though, yes, the seed will be similar, but that you want it to grow into something that is also going to benefit, just like the original benefits. So perpetuating ourselves is one thing. That's a natural process. When two forces mate, they will give birth to something else. But you need an additional blessing, and that's where we need work and effort, that seed should bear fruit that's similar to the fruit of the generation before it. So the lesson one we learn from the tree is the power of perpetuation. And we should never take for granted that. Sometimes to appreciate a blessing, you want to look at the contrast. Actually, in this case, I don't even want to mention it, but the fact of the matter is, if we did not have the power to give birth, if there was no such concept that in creation a creature can give birth to another creature, we would all be essentially much more mortal than we are today. As it is, we're mortal human beings, live temporal lives, meaning everything in our life ages, erodes, and dies. We're mortal. We're not immortal. We're not eternal. But it could be worse than it is. And that would be if we had no ability to affect the next generation. And there's two ways we can affect the next generation. One is actual biologically having children. Like a tree, through seed, bears another tree. But there's another way. As the Torah tells us later in chapter Bamidbar, it talks about the two remaining children of Aaron, Elazar and Isamar. Aaron had 4 children, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Isamar. The first 2 died in ecstasy when they went into the temple, unprepared. And the other 2, Elazar and Isamar, so in the chapter Bamidbar, there's an expression that says, these are the children of Aaron and Moses, Elazar and Isamar. But Elazar and Isamar are only the biological children of Aaron. Where did Moses suddenly fit in here? So the Medrash and Rashi cites it that says that V'shenantum levanecha ela talmidim. When we say you shall teach your children, it means it also includes your students, because talmidim kriyim banim, students are called your children. When you inspire somebody, when you teach someone, Even one word, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Achitefel, one word he learned from him, even if he was had a lot of weaknesses and was not exactly a great man, but if you learn something from somebody, in a way they gave birth to you. Obviously, if it's a significant teaching, then it's a significant birth. As a matter of fact, there were Hasidim that would consider their birthday the day that they first came to see their Rebbe, their spiritual birth. So even though they technically have a biological birthday, when they physically were born, but some attributed their birthday to the day when they were spiritually born, when they had their first spiritual epiphany, because that's when they really began to live. Well, regardless, I'm not advocating that you necessarily have to do that, but the point is that birthing takes on many shapes. And we have human beings, and this is again something we just take for granted, we have the power to affect history, to change destiny. So though we're mortal human beings, living in our time, in our space, and you think, that's it, you're a self-contained entity, and you can only do that much, and you may achieve some things in your life, but then you're going to, one day a person will die, 120, we Jews like to say, 180, whatever the age you choose. Some don't see it such a blessing unless you also have health, so at 120 healthy years. So you could argue that we're all like self-contained entities, like I described earlier, the minerals. Think of the grains of sand that lie at a beach, or the billions of minerals all over the world. Each one serves its purpose, but they don't have any influence directly on anything else. It's true, as I mentioned, everything in this symbiotic universe supports everything else. Life would not be the way it is unless we had all this complex multi-ecosystems, but not in a direct fashion. So we were blessed with the power, with the ability. We were blessed with the ability to actually plant a seed that can have a delay reaction or immediate and bear fruit. We can do it physically, as I mentioned, physical children, or we can do it spiritually. We can do it in the people we influence. And as I mentioned, not just with people, we can also do it with the earth itself. When you partake in any part of this universe, whether you're walking down a street, or you're absorbing the heat of the sun, or you're drinking a cup of water, or eating an apple, or consuming any part of the universe, and that energy becomes part of you, and that energy then is used to help another human being, to do something positive, you have forever changed yourself, of course, the world, and even that energy has now become part of something that will be perpetuated forever and ever. Whereas if an apple remained on the tree, it would at some point have fallen off, rotted. Yes, and then of course been absorbed by the earth and probably given birth to something new. It may become a seed of another apple tree. But not the effect of actually creating something new as we have the ability to do when we affect other people. So what we learn from the tree is this power of perpetuation. But in our case, it requires choice. A tree doesn't have to do anything. A tree in its natural process will grow, will shed its seeds, and those seeds will ultimately be cultivated, be nurtured, and if there's the right conditions and the right watering and so on, those seeds will give birth to the next generation of that particular species. But with human beings, we are the weird creatures that have choice. We can either destroy, build, or be neutral. What's called the procrastinate. Is that the right expression? Any procrastinators in the room here? We all have the procrastinator. We all have the procrastinator within us. And I remember hearing this very entertaining advertisement radio ad about a guy. You don't know what the ad is about until the end of the ad, but basically it's a guy. Looks like you could hear from the way he's describing it, he's joining some type of 12-step program. So he's at one of these meetings, and everybody, welcome Norman, hi Norman, hi, and they call it PA, Procrastinators Anonymous. So he says, okay, I'm Norman. I've now stop procrastinating for 2 years, 3 months, and then 5 days or something like that. And everybody says, great, great, great. They all applaud him. And then he goes on and says, what finally did it when I hit rock bottom was when Norwegian cruise lines advertised a 30% discount on, this is not an advertisement for Norwegian cruise lines, I'm just telling you the ad. Advertised their 30% discount, but up till November 1st. And I called November 2nd. And that was it. That's when I hit rock bottom. That's when I joined the program. And I haven't been procrastinating ever since. I found that pretty cute. Being a writer and have my own, especially when you have a lot of pressure and there's a lot in your head, that's when your procrastinator goes into overdrive. So the procrastinator, the third option of being neutral, the truth is not very neutral at all. When you're climbing a mountain, you're either going up or you're going down. If you stop, you're really going down. So in life, it's either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. There's no in between. To say I'm from the undecided, that too is a position. So in truth, there are really two options. And we human beings have that ability to either use our strengths and use our blessings to perpetuate, or to impede, or to abort, to stop things from growing. So this blessing that he gave the tree, which is a blessing we can all give each other, that may be God's will, with God's help, that each of us, that our seeds look like us, meaning, obviously we're talking about looking like us, the positive us, is a tremendous blessing. It's the greatest blessing you can give somebody. Because the blessing that it's not just the good deeds you did in your life, but it's also the good deeds that live on forever. Because you've impacted the world forever. And you see that in the fruit that come from your influences. So it's an interesting and maybe a humbling exercise to figure out what type of fruit have we actually yielded. I've no doubt that everybody here, everybody listening, everybody on earth probably has done a few good things in their life. And not just good things, but things that have borne fruit. That even when you're not there any longer, you made an impact. You come to a place, you talk, conversation with a person, that something you did, you planted a seed that will forever change the environment you're in. But often, number one is, I don't know if we're living up to our full potential in this regard. Number two, often many of these things happen by accident. When I say by accident, not necessarily deliberate. The goal here, when we celebrate the New Year of Trees, is to figure out how to actually deliberately maximize and see our mission in life is to plant as many such seeds in the world. Or the way the mystics would put it is to discover, refine, and liberate the divine sparks that are allocated to us. So each of us is allocated with the amount of divine sparks that are all over. We don't know exactly where they are. But in your lifetime, in your life trajectory, you're going to encounter these sparks. There's a reason exactly why you were born in the city you were born, why you will travel to wherever you travel, why your path, your journey goes through its twists and turns that are different than my journey. Because that's where your sparks are. And there we don't have free will, where our journeys will take us. Your free will is what you're going to do when you get there. And whether you will redeem this, liberate the sparks, or you won't liberate them. None of us chose what city to be born to. No one chose what parents to be born to, what schools to go to, and 1,000 other different factors. How tall we're going to be, what color is our skin, our genes. Most of these things are, not most, almost all of them are predetermined. But what you'll do with them is completely up to you. Now, of course, different predispositions offer different opportunities and different challenges. But as Maimonides writes in the Laws of Tshuva, in the Mishnah Torah, he says that everything is predestined as far as your personality and features and nature goes, except what you're going to do with it, whether it'll be used for good or for evil, for good or for bad. So yes, some people are born with certain strengths, and those same strengths can become their greatest liability. And there are other people born with liabilities or weaknesses, and they overcome them. So to just say, if I was blessed with those things, I would be fine. That's not true. There's some people blessed with many, many gifts, and they squander them all, And as a matter of fact, some of them use them in the worst possible way, to be destructive. And there are people born with everyone has gifts. But some people don't have those gifts, and they've learned to overcome that and achieve greatness. And there are many, many examples for this. The Talmud says about two sages. One was born in wealth, and one was born in poverty. And they say that each of them are mechayiv. The one that was born in poverty compels anyone born in poverty to live up to high standards because he became a great scholar. So you can't say, because I was born in poverty, I couldn't become a great scholar. So he's mechayiv anim. And the other one who was born in wealth, you could say, well, you know what, born in wealth, you could be spoiled and feel entitled and so on. And he grew to greatness, so that compels anyone that born with those privileges, that's not an excuse either. So every situation offers its challenges and its opportunities. So each of us have our divine sparks. And the trees we will encounter. And when I say trees, I mean it only as an example. Everything, the people, the trees, the spaces, the times, everything, the languages we know. Sometimes the way I describe it when we talk about the mission statement in your life. Pop, your personality, the opportunities, people and places that you will encounter in your life, these are all part of a pre-planned script, choreography. But connecting the dots and maximizing them and utilizing them, exploiting the opportunity in a spiritual sense is completely up to us. And that is in a way both a challenge in life, but it's also a great responsibility, but it's also a great gift. So each of us has allocated sparks that no one else has been given those sparks to elevate except you and I. So there's that powerful story with the Baal Shem Tov, who sent his students once on a mission, go somewhere, and they finished the job. They came back. They came back to report to him that they accomplished, mission accomplished. But to their surprise, instead of him being interested in the details of the mission and what happened, he went to them at least, seemed like a tangent, something peripheral, the issue of how they traveled. He wanted to know exactly how did they get to the place where they fulfilled their mission. So they gave him a brief description, but he wanted to know details. Like, where did you stop? Where did you sleep over? What did you eat? Where did you go? So they started describing it. And they described that one evening they came to a place that was very late. So what they did was they rested on the side of the road. They found a place to camp out. And then in the morning they got up, they washed themselves, prayed, etc. And they, after the prayer, they sat down to have a little breakfast. And they said they took a cup of water from a spring. It was a brook, a spring of water that was right there. Maybe it was the same spring that the Talmud talks about here, that under the tree. And the Baal Shem Tov heard that. He suddenly jumped up and stated the following. He said, you see, that spring of water was waiting from the beginning of creation, from the beginning of time, for you to come and make a blessing on this water. Now you'd think, okay, they went on a mission. Everything else seemingly was tangential. It was seemingly circumstantial. Who cares whether they took this road or that road? Or they went this way or that way? What water they stopped at? What they drank, what they didn't drink? But that's not the case. Everything is part of the plan. Nothing is just means to another end. And for the Baal Shem Tov, that is what he wanted to focus on. They fulfilled the mission, obviously, was great. But even their journey itself, the fact that they stopped and took a drink of water, the entire existence is waiting for them to do that. Now think about that for a moment and apply that to your own life. Imagine looking at your life in that way. That the places where you're going to be tomorrow or tonight, wherever it may be, is waiting for you to come from the beginning of time to do something there. And I know it's a pretty heavy weight to carry such an attitude. But it's also, if you think about it, it adds a dimension to life that so often is lacking, which is excitement, passion about something healthy, and not monotony. Many of us look at our lives as being often a monotonous routine. The daily grind. I'm doing every day the same thing again and again and again. And we look for all these highs and escapes and ways to somewhat relieve what they call existential tension or existential monotony of life. And sometimes the things we search for to get out of that boredom is healthy, sometimes not so healthy. But the fact is, you don't need anything, right? In your own journeys, in every detail of your life, are opportunities waiting to be released by you. And they're waiting for the beginning of time for you to come there to do something with that situation. So I cannot say that we could suddenly cold turkey change our attitude, that your whole life should suddenly be focused in that way. That I think would take some discipline and effort. But at least once a day, or a few times a day, to think that way is a tremendous gift. So in case you're in the doldrums and you're having a bad day, why don't you think about that? There's no such thing as a bad day. Yeah, you may be in a bad mood, maybe some things happen that way you not worked out the way you'd like, but you're right there, standing there, and that is waiting for you to release something, release an energy that will forever change existence. Not only forward, but also past, because the beginning of time has been waiting for this moment to take place. It also empowers you to understand you have the power to generate, to be proactive. You're not a victim waiting for something to happen. You're not stuck. You don't find yourself in a situation. You place yourself in situations, and when you're in every situation you're in, you've been placed, and there's a reason for you to be there. It's generally the concept of Hashgacha Pratis, they call it, divine providence. I didn't want to use that word because I didn't want it to become another, he's talking about Hashgacha Pratis. I wanted to spoke about it in somewhat novel terms. But just for the record, that's what it is. But what does that mean? It means there's a choreography to your life. There's a plan. Now, you're all sitting here in this room. Maybe you feel you came here to hear a few words from me, but maybe there's a different reason. Maybe there's something you have to achieve. Maybe something not only you have to hear, maybe something you have to give. And you may not know this, but you may be giving right now, even as you're sitting here. Just because one person is speaking and others are listening, that doesn't mean that energy is not flowing back and forth, and the vibes, and so on. You never know who's giving the most. The Talmud says about his great teacher, this great scholar, he said, I learned much from my teachers, and even more from my colleagues. But above all, mitamidei yesim kulam, from my students I learned most. Now, what does that mean exactly? That could have meant, does it mean while he was teaching and they were sitting as students, or it means afterwards? Very practically, it means even while he was teaching and they were receiving from him, he received more than than he was giving. For whatever the reason, because he has to go deeper into his own mind and spirit to teach, or because of their questions and their ability to probe, whatever the reason may be. Or maybe even the different reasons. There's many reasons how this can be explained. So the bottom line is, what the tree teaches us is the power of perpetuation. But in our case, it's the choice that we have to make. And knowing that existence hangs in the balance. And if you don't do it, no one else is going to do it but you. I would say it's a pretty empowering thing to hear. Now, for some of us, it may be formidable, one second, it's too much responsibility for me. But first of all, no one asked you. That's your responsibility. It was given to you. No, God didn't ask you whether you wanted it or not. That is your job. And that's number one. Number two, maybe that means that it's time to learn to have confidence in yourself. Because if that was given to you, maybe you do have what it takes to get it done. To say it's too much for me, it's like saying, God gave me too many brains. What? Gave you too many gifts? It's too much for you. It means you have the ability and opportunity to use it. Now, you may not be in an environment where your friends and your colleagues and the media world is encouraging us to feel so empowered. That's another story. But the fact is, we all have such skills and powers, and each of us have them unique. And what your strengths are, other people do not have, and we all complement each other in that fashion. Now, another lesson from trees that can help us, access this power is, you look at a tree, it's made up of generally 4 components. You have the roots, you have the trunk of the tree, you have branches, and if it's a fruit tree, you have fruits. Now, of course, there are more details when you break it down even further, but to the naked eye, these are the main elements. A powerful tree. And it's interesting, is the only entity on earth, or an existence that we know, that grows in 2 different directions at the same time. The roots grow downward, and the tree grows upward. As a matter of fact, they're interdependent. The deeper the roots, and the farther they reach, and the more nourishment they get, the greater the tree will grow. Which, if you think about it, is also in personal growth, usually doesn't work that way. People think in terms of, there are times when I dig my deep roots, and there are times when I spread out. Even on a very basic level. When you're in a process of, let's say, building, you're not necessarily in a process of you're building your business, you're not ready to open for business. Here, the roots are developing while the tree is also growing outward and spreading its wings, which teaches us many things. Number one is that, to be slightly poetic, a tree with deep roots will bear beautiful fruits and healthy fruits. So that means, in a way, that roots can mean many things. Roots, above all, in our personal lives, means the people that help us be, who helped shape us to who we are today. It can be parents, it can be teachers, it can be books, it can be ideas, it can be anything that has shaped you. These are roots. Before Isaac Newton, who coined this term that became popular, it's stated in books of the Rishonim. These are 12th, 13th century scholars, Jewish scholars. They write there's a concept called nonos al gaba anok. It means a midget on the shoulders of giants. And it means that essentially that we are part of the past, an extension of the past. And a midget that stands on the shoulder of giants can see farther than the giant can. But the interesting twist is that only when you stand on those shoulders. Get off the shoulders, the midget can't see anything. So nonos al gaba anok, which means that if you want to achieve great things in your life, it's critical to be grounded in your roots well. To say, I want to be so innovative and so original that I have nothing before me, I'm self-made, defeats the whole purpose. And you learn that from a tree. Without the roots, it can't grow upward. It can't spread itself out without those profound roots. The guy that comes, presents his lifetime work before the wizards of the world, the wise wizards of the world, presents a scientific magnum opus. And he waits, anticipates to hear what his colleagues how they'll judge him. This is his life work. So finally they come back to him after a few weeks of deliberation, and they say to him, the consensus was unanimous that your paper, your work is both good and original. He's like, wow, couldn't believe that. But then they add one final line. They say, the problem is this. The part that's good is not original, and the part that's original is not good. So, when someone says something is too original, it doesn't always mean it's a great quality. The most powerful, truthful ideas shouldn't be that original. People knew them from the beginning of time. The greatest compliment you can really give a good teacher is saying, I haven't heard anything from you new, but I never quite put it in those words. Which means it resonates. It resonates. Something too original, you have to be very wary of. But the interesting paradox is that some of the most original ideas, Einstein's breakthroughs, when you go to the roots of how he got there, you'll see the profound roots that go back thousands of years of wisdom. However, nobody saw it quite that way. So, original is a very tricky word. We like something completely innovative. The greatest innovations are built on very profound roots, but the person who actually, I would even argue, that it's someone who's able to go to the pure roots and not diluted or in any way distorted by different manifestations. And when you go back to the pure essence of ideas, you can innovate unbelievably new ideas. And you see this today even with all the modern physics and quantum mechanics, certain basic principles that have not been clouded and overshadowed by so-called whatever developments may have taken place. Those are the ones that become seeds for unbelievable breakthroughs. So breakthrough doesn't mean that it's some original idea that nobody ever thought of. It's actually the opposite. It's maybe going back to the most original of all and applying it in a completely new way. And so the idea of wisdom and knowledge, of being original, is ridiculous. Knowledge is accumulative. There's no way that someone can build knowledge without knowing knowledge before it. So it's true, you have to learn to discover how do you discard old patterns of knowledge or old adaptation, old applications, and just maintain, the pure essence of the truth of the idea, that's an art. That's not that simple. But to suggest that it's some type of new ideas as if they never existed before is ridiculous. Knowledge is accumulative. And the people who do have breakthroughs, in a way, go back sometimes to the basics. And you can see this in your own experience even at times. I don't know, everyone here has their own creative process. But part of the creative process is, let's say you come up with some concept, some idea. Whatever it is. An idea. That idea, firstly, remember that for every 1,000 ideas, only one is going to remain in your consciousness. It's like elef nechnasim lebeis hamedrash ve'echad yetzel lehira. They say 1,000 go into the academy, and one comes out that's actionable. But let's say an idea does begin to take what's the word for take? To take hold, like a seed that takes hold, and it begins to develop and grow. And then you start getting into the details. And it gets very, very detailed. You start developing it, fleshing it out. At some point, what usually will happen, and this is a healthy part of the process, you're going to get confused. Because now the details have taken over. And here's where the critical component that you have to go back to your original point of departure if you want to maintain the integrity of the idea. And if you don't do that, you often can lose sight of it all. So what happens is, the myriad of the details, let's say a business plan starts getting so many pages, and someone says, 1 second, let's go to what's the point of this whole thing? And someone says, well, we forgot to write down that point. Sometimes it's very hard to retrace your steps, because you get caught up and you wander away. That's why many companies and businesses, even very efficient ones, at some point can lose tremendous amount of money and even go bankrupt, because they lost sight of their mission. Because when you're dealing with many diverse people in a company, and many diverse ideas, and there's no one that's maintaining control of, quality control of, is this aligned with our original mission, our original point of departure? The expression used in some Hasidic texts is, you go b'derech haklosen, which means you completely get wandering, you're lost in the woods, without any compass. So in Kabbalistic terminology, Chochmah is the Nakuda, is the spark, is the point of departure. Bina is the fleshing out and embellishment of an idea. And that embellishment, as is developed, a concept is developed into details, needs to always be kept honest and reality checked by connecting it back to Chochmah, to the original point of departure. So that essentially means that if you want to grow outward, you must be very rooted in the ground. And the people who are most rooted in any particular field will be the ones that can innovate best. And you can trust it, because they don't wander outside of the reservation, as they say. So paradoxically, the more outward you want to go, the deeper inward you have to go. And this is absolutely true in writing or in communicating. If you've ever written a paper, you could have an idea in your mind. Until you've written it, you don't really get it. When you have to write it, you have to go back far deeper inside yourself to really, really crystallize it. And that's why it's so difficult to write. That's why it's so difficult to speak. Writing is harder than speaking, but because now you have to bring it outward, you have to go back inward. The one example used for it is the bow and arrow, that you have to archery. You have to, that's why it's called archery. You have to, the farther you want to shoot an arrow, the more you have to draw back the bow. That's how it is. It's the rule of all life. So the greater the tree grows outwards, the deeper are its roots. And so that's a critical lesson in how one builds confidence in perpetuating. Because as I said earlier, we may have all the gifts in the world, but we don't feel confident. What happens? A person is blessed with all the gifts, but they don't have courage. They're afraid. They don't feel confident in their gifts. That can be just as bad as someone not having the gifts. You build confidence by realizing, through humility, that you need roots. There's no such thing as just a self-made man or woman. There's roots. And roots are, as I said, they can be ideas, they can be people, they can be anything that helps ground you, that you can then from there build outward. I don't know if you know this, when NASA, for the first time, when man went to outer space, so the first time was in the early 60s, late 50s, Sputnik was the first. The Russians beat the Americans to it, but the Americans sent its first. Yes, who was it? John Glenn, I believe, the first orbit around the Earth. But anyway, the first astronauts that went outside of the gravitational pull of Earth. So they sent with these astronauts a series of experiments, because humans never saw they never had the ability to test things under the conditions where there's no gravity, zero gravity or almost zero gravity. So one of the things they sent with the first astronauts were plants. They sent a plant with them. Plant, like a plant you have on your kitchen window or something. So they sent a plant. And interesting, you know what happened? The plant, when they came back, the plant had roots growing from all directions. Because once it no longer had a center of gravity, the roots were looking for water. In outer space, there's no water. So they were searching. So the roots grew from every part of the plant. It wasn't just from the bottom of the plant going downward. They were going all over the place. So talk about intelligence. Roots search for water. And this is proven, if you put an impediment, and a root, let's say, is growing, and is growing toward a water source, and for some reason, let's say you put concrete there, the root will grow around it. We'll figure out a way. I mean, roots, we know what roots do, even in the great New York with all its pavement and cement and concrete. The fact is, roots destroy everything, pipes and then concrete, because roots spread, and they will search for what they need to search for, which on one hand can be somewhat wild, but on the other hand, it's also a lesson. Roots look for a source of sustenance, and they don't think that they have the sustenance on their own. So a great mighty tree, you think, hey, it has all that it needs. No, it knows that it needs roots, and those roots are what feed and nourish the tree for it to be able to spread out. So, you have in human personalities, call them, there's moon people and there's sun people. What kind of guy, let's say, or spouse would you like to have? Here's two options. And they usually don't come together. One is a person who's really spontaneous, bohemian-like, always has a lot of great imagination, creative, but not consistent for the same reason. Meaning you don't know when they're going to show up next and so on. Or a person who's like a clock, consistent, a time is a time, but it's also going to be quite monotonous. So you find in relationships, you find some people that are they're great to be with, they're party animals, but the downside is that they don't know when the party is over. They have what we call commitment issues. So we call that moon people. They're always going through phases. There's changes. The sun, on the other hand, is very consistent, very reliable, and you know that person will be there. But you don't find necessarily a spark, a type of what's called some wild energy, which is necessary in a good relationship. And of course, all of us would say, "I wish I could have both, the best of both worlds." That's nice. Good luck. I wish you could find that. Can you really have it? The answer is that you can. So in Judaism, you know that there are three types of calendars in the world today. There are lunar calendars and there are solar calendars, and there are one calendar that reconciles lunar and solar. So lunar calendar, the Muslims go by a lunar calendar. Some Far Eastern countries go by a strictly lunar calendar. The Gregorian calendar, which is basically the Western calendar, is a solar calendar. Now the difference is not just whether it's the moon or the sun. The difference is also in time-wise. A lunar year is around 11 and a half days shorter than a solar year, because lunar cycle is 29-30 days, and which if you think about it, 29-30 times 12 is around 354, and a solar year is 365 days, broken into 12 months is like 30 or 31 days, with one February or 28 or 29. So, how's that relevant to our discussion here? You'll see in a moment that the problem is this, that the seasons are regulated by the solar cycle. Months are regulated by the lunar cycle. So let's take, for example, in Judaism, Passover is on the 15th of Nisan. That's what the Torah mandates, 15th of Nisan. But it also says in another verse that it should be in the spring season. And that's where everything gets all problematic. Because if you go by a lunar calendar, if it's the 15th of Nisan, so the first year, yes, it'll be the spring season. The next year, because the lunar calendar is 11 days shorter than the solar, it's going to be a little shorter. It's still in the spring. But after 10 years, it's going to be 110 days shorter. It'll be in the winter or in the autumn. And it'll continue. So the sages derive from this the fact that it has to be spring and the 15th of Nisan, that we know from this that we have to reconcile the solar and the lunar, and therefore we have, in Jewish astronomical calculations, which are quite brilliant, written up thousands of years ago by Hillel Hazaken, to create what's called a leap year. The difference, however, in a solar leap year, like this year is a solar leap year, every 4 years they add a day in February. February 29 days will be this year. But in a Hebrew leap year, you add an entire month. And basically you add 7 such years in 19 years. Let's not get into all the complications of it. You add 7 leap years in 19 years, it balances out the 11 and a half day discrepancy, which keeps Passover always in the spring season. Now, all this is astronomy. What is relevant to our discussion? Relevant to our discussion is that in Jewish thought, the idea of both having a type of spontaneous personality, which is like the moon, and a consistent one like the sun, is reconcilable, and it needs to be reconcilable. You need to have both. And in a tree, it manifests it. You see, a tree is deeply rooted. You don't want those roots wavering. You don't want those roots shaky. You want those roots deeply grounded into the earth. But at the same time, a tree grows outward and spreads and spreads and spreads and bears fruit. And those fruit bear seeds, and the tree can perpetuate itself forever. So you have both qualities. You have consistency, a solid foundation, and you have spontaneity and freedom, free spirit. So the way Judaism puts it is that if you have deep roots, then you have the courage and the confidence to really fly. So my point I'm making here is that you could find somebody that has both qualities. But it's not so simple. Because many people are running around and spontaneous, and our so-called bohemians are really running around because they're running for their lives, and they're afraid to be in one place. It's called real commitment issues. It takes a free spirit, a real free spirit, to have the courage to sometimes just be grounded. That's the question. I meet people who call themselves free spirits, and I always say, well, if you're a real free spirit, do you have the courage to stay in one place for a while? And the fact is, that's when you really know a person is able to achieve great heights. So the tree teaches us that next lesson, which is the ability to integrate two opposite type of personalities. Birds fly, but a bird flies after it has the confidence, after it builds the confidence, because it has a nest to go home to. A flying bird without a nest is not going to fly very far. At some point, it will become drained, and it will die. It will fall and die. So you have to have a nest, and then when you have the nest, the place that you're grounded in, you're rooted in, and then you can have, like a midget that stands on the shoulders of giants, you can have the ability to go as far as you want to go. And the same is through conceptually, intellectually, as I mentioned. You want an idea to go very far out, you have to go very far in. There's no way around that. And everything in life has that type of dual properties. So that's yet another lesson from the trees. Now, I can go on and on, but time is limited. And if I was in my spontaneous mode, we could go here, like we used to do many years ago, right? You recall, sometimes till 3 or 4 in the morning. But I don't know how many people are going to come back next week if I do that. So, there is what we call a curfew. There's no curfew in New York. New York never sleeps, but we all have our curfews. So the challenge is to mu'at machzik hamaruba, as they say. How do you package a lot of free spiritedness in a structured thing? So music is a good example. Music is the same thing. You can play music freestyle or by ear, But the people who learn musical notes, which requires discipline, requires study, requires grounding, roots, you're rooted in those notes and you understand music theory in that way, you can play far greater music than just playing it by ear. Then you combine both. On the other hand, you have people who are just very conservative, very orthodox musicians, and they just follow the notes, and it does have a certain static and a certain, what's the word for it, lack of imagination. But those that have the imagination are not outside of the structure. So music is an excellent example of the paradox, where structure helps you defy structure, where structure helps you transcend structure. And the truth is, if you think about it, especially scientifically, you find hundreds of such examples, thousands. Everywhere you'll find there's a structure, but once you have that structure mastered, you then can find ways that the structure itself catapults you to a place that's beyond structure. So all these are lessons that the tree captures in a very immediate way. You see it, and many other lessons that I'm sure, as I say, ten l'chacham v'yech kamoid. You give wise stuff to wise people, and they definitely it plants seeds, and seeds bear fruit. And you'll see some of the great teachers. The greatest sign of a teacher is the people who teach you something that is exactly like that, planting a seed that at the time you may not even appreciate it or know what it is, and years later, you realize that thing I heard or I read or years ago, now I really get it. And that's when you know that it has that type of perpetual power. So let me say the blessing that this fellow said. May I bless you all that your seeds and your fruit should be like you. The best of you, of course, I mean. And that you should use every opportunity that comes your way, which they come all the time, and recognize that these are put in your path for you to do something with it. So this could be a person you meet, it could be a so-called random experience, it could be a stranger, it could be a friend. But nothing is meaningless. There's no such thing as an empty experience. The challenge is for us we have to be the ones that actualize the potential in every situation. It will not happen on its own. So you're placed in a situation, your challenges, your opportunities, how are you going to tap it? How are you going to exploit the spirituality that can come out of that particular experience? If you think that way, as I said, a few times a day, you'll be all right. And it'll start, as they say, these things breed each other. Seeds breed seeds. When you start thinking that way, then what happens is you start thinking more that way. And the more you think about it, the more opportunities come your way. And you'll see as well, as I often say, with people that gravitate around someone, usually drawn to somebody because they bring out this type of energy inside of you. You feel it. Whereas other people drain you because they're constantly parasitically, what's it called? I want to say harsh words like leeches, but people who are constantly draining because they're constantly taking. It is those that have that ability to go and those that make the choice to actually look at an opportunity and see what can I do to help actualize something. That's the people that are a pleasure to be around because they generate and they're constantly initiating and proactively initiating different things. So that's also my blessing to you, that you should be an initiator, a generator, not just waiting on the sidelines for something to happen, but to make things happen. So on this day, as we conclude Tu B'Shvat, may we learn the lesson from the trees. And remember, as I said earlier, microcosm, macrocosm, we have a tree inside each of us. Ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh. A person, the human being, is like the tree in the field. And many lessons that the tree offers us can help us grow personally. But as I said as well earlier, that's not just the tree. Every aspect of nature has tremendous amount of lessons. Everything. So in case you're bored and you just look up to the sky, and even in New York there's a sky, if you can make it out, and study the sky, study the clouds, study the sun. You'll always have a lesson. Everything has a lesson. So, with that said, I would conclude by saying that Philip will be giving his class tomorrow evening. Okay? If you have not left your email address with us, please do so. We will have a class next Wednesday in our continuing series. All these classes are, by the way, live broadcast and recorded, so they're all available. In case you missed the detail, you want to hear it again, you can feel free to do so. It's like the Yes channel. You could have the game Encore. There's some people, I don't even know how people watch a game, they watch it again. It's interesting. But that's up to you. But bottom line is they're all archived, they're all available, and please see myself and our whole team here as a resource in every possible way. We are constantly looking for opportunities to actualize the spiritual potential in every given situation, but you can't really do it alone, so it takes two to tango. So we invite you to the dance. Thank you very much.